Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Good Insights podcast. This episode will be hosted by me, Kirsten McHugh. Even though I have been with the Good Project for many years now, this is my very first podcast episode, and I'm excited to announce that today our guest is Dr. Jeanne Nakamura. Dr. Nakamura is a professor in the Division of Behavioral and Organizational Sciences at Claremont Graduate University. She co-founded the Positive Psychology Concentration at the school and directs the Quality of Life Research Center, a nonprofit research institute dedicated to the study of positive psychology, that is, the study of human strengths such as creativity, intrinsic motivation, and responsibility. Throughout her career, she has investigated positive psychology in a developmental context, including engagement and creativity, mentoring and good work, and aging well. Welcome, Dr. Nakamura, and thank you for joining me today.
Thanks so much, Kirsten. It's really a pleasure to be here.
And so you were part of the original founding team of scientists who started the research that led to the Good Project. Can you tell us a little bit about that time and your role in the group?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. So the project started when I was a graduate student at the University of Chicago. At that time, Mike Csikszentmihalyi was at University of Chicago, and Bill was at Brown. Bill Damon was at Brown, and Howard was where Howard is at Harvard. And they had spent a year at the center at Stanford, and at the time, Mike and Howard were writing books about creativity, about creative lives, and Bill was writing a book with Ann Colby about moral exemplars. So they were all doing exemplar studies, and they were working on those two topics, creativity and moral development. And in their conversations, my understanding is they had a lot of talk about the tensions that can arise in creative work around social responsibility. And they spent a lot of time together, and I think they left that year with an interest in doing some collaborative work around that topic. So originally, the study wasn't the Good Work Project. Originally, the study was the Humane Creativity Project.
Yes.
And of course, I had been exposed to both Howard and Bill's work. And in fact, the book that Bill and Ann were working on at that time, Some Do Care, was maybe one of the most influential books I've read in my academic life. And so they started the project then on the inspiration of that year together. And I was the one of a couple of students who right away was working on the project.
That is so interesting how they were all there together. So you have been credited with creating what was originally called the Q sort, but what is now known as the value sort. It's long been the most popular tool on our website, and tens of thousands of people have completed it. Can you tell us a little bit about how the idea for this came about and what you think about it now?
Yeah, so I'm really fascinated by the way that it's been transformed into a reflection tool. It was originally purely a research tool. It was originally a way to understand what occupations or professions valued and what individual members of the profession valued, and the alignment or misalignment between those two. So a recent doctoral graduate of Mike's at Chicago, Insoo Che, and I distilled the values that were in that original sort from interviews that had been done with creative individuals, because again, this was going to be used in a study of humane creativity. And they were meant to be sorted by individuals to provide a glimpse of their hierarchy of values. So, I mean, the issue with trying to study values is that they're goods. So everybody's inclination is to rate most of them as important to them, and to rate most of them as very important. So you need some way to get people to reflect on what's more important and less important among all of these things that are, most of which they consider good. So that's what the Q sort was meant to do. It's a methodology for obliging people to think that through and place things in some kind of a rank order. And we used it in interviews on many of the Good Work projects, including one in which we studied mentoring lineages to try to understand if values seem to be absorbed across generations within a lineage.
Wow, I didn't
Um,
know that.
yeah, it was a nice tool for that, as well as for trying to understand what was most important to people in a profession and
Yeah,
whether they saw themselves as being aligned with other members of the same profession.
that's fascinating. And now thinking about your current research. So the Good Project and our team, we've traditionally looked at good work, in professionals, but also recently we've been working a lot on good work in school-aged children, typically like middle school, high school, some college. And so I'm wondering, like, your work has gone in the opposite direction and you've done so much research on positive aging. Can you tell us and like the people who follow the Good Project a little bit about what positive aging is? Because some of us might not be as familiar with the term.
Yeah, so positive aging, it's more of a shift in perspective than necessarily a precise term of science.
Okay.
Um, so if you think about the way that maybe, at least in the United States, most people think about aging,
Hmm.
they think about it as part of the lifespan in which you primarily experience decline and loss, right? So if you step back and think about the whole lifespan,
Yeah.
we think of an early period of growth and development, and then we think about a period of maybe plateau in the middle of life, and then it's all downhill from there. And so to talk about positive aging, it's not meant to deny that there is loss and decline
Yeah.
in the second half of life. But it's part of a sort of a perspective within developmental psychology, lifespan developmental perspective, that would argue that throughout the whole of the lifespan, like at any age, you're experiencing gains in some domains and losses in some domains. So even at the end of life, it's more appropriate to think of and to try to understand both gains and losses. So
Mhm.
so positive aging. I mean, I think some versions of positive aging may be more exclusively focused on what's the positive. But I think
Yeah.
if you step back, it's more of an attempt to have a balanced perspective on the opportunities that exist across the lifespan for growth.
I think that's so important because I don't think we talk about that enough. And so when I was reading up on what you were doing, I was like, wow, this is so interesting to me to finally like see something, because my parents are getting older and they're retiring and a lot of their friends are too. So I'm seeing it with our close family friends as well. And they're looking for opportunities to do something more and something different. And you see a huge difference in the quality of life for the people who find that and really get into things and get curious and get excited, and those who haven't been able to find that yet.
Yeah,
And I
that's
think,
right.
yeah.
That's right. And, demographically in the United States, the whole of the baby boom is now in the age range that we're talking about. So
Oh,
societally,
totally.
it's very conspicuous.
Yeah. And I think I mentioned it in an email to you, but I'd seen a recent show on Netflix that was about a gentleman who had just retired. He had been an engineering professor, and his daughter noticed that like he was kind of just floating in life and he wasn't really doing anything, and he didn't seem like he had any purpose. And so she prompted him. She said, I really want you to get out there. I want you to find something. You need to get involved. You need community. And of course, he finds some crazy ad in a newspaper. He becomes an undercover spy, and hilarity ensues. He has to integrate himself into some nursing home. I got through like the first episode, but all I was thinking immediately of your work, and I was like, look, he found purpose. He's finding things to get interested about. And I was like, I know this is wild, but looking forward to our podcast. And by the way, you need to check this out. But I think there's something really true in that too about
Yeah,
finding.
absolutely. I mean, it is the part of the lifespan where we have the fewest scripts and the
Yeah.
least of a mapped out pathway for how to go through life. And especially as the lifespan extends,
Yeah.
that period could be decades long.
Yes. And the
Yeah.
quality of that lifetime too really
Yeah.
matters.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, people make a distinction between the lifespan and the health span sometimes.
Yeah, that's true. How would you describe what it means to do good work for yourself, your community or your society in your later years?
Mhm. Yeah, I think that's a really interesting question. Maybe to say a little bit more about that last point. I think that notion that we don't have clear scripts connects to this question about good work. There is a perspective in the study of the lifespan that says that, in the US, we very much segmented the lifespan so that the early part of the lifespan is devoted to school, the middle part of the lifespan is devoted to work, the later part of the lifespan is devoted to leisure.
Yeah,
And in life course sociology, they've raised the question of, well, wouldn't it be more appropriate and maybe more consistent with quality of life if that were tipped on its side and across the whole lifespan, those three domains, big domains of life were more integrated? And so I think that does apply to aging as well, that maybe
yeah,
instead of thinking about it purely in terms of withdrawal from work and a
yeah,
time for leisure, the scripts that are available to people to think about later life could be more diversified. And in my own work, the way that I think it connects to positive aging connects to good work is that I worked for about 10 years in my research with this amazing think tank in Northern California that was really very focused on the question of what could careers look like, second careers look like for people who are retiring and want to continue or begin doing work that gives back to their community. And so that
yeah,
I think it was when I discovered their work very compatible with the interest that I had in what that transition in later life might be a transition to.
hmm,
And I think from the research standpoint, the question is how to understand those pathways better. And I think from their standpoint, it was very much a question of, what can be done to make people aware that there are other pathways out there and to try to create the structural opportunities for people to follow other possible pathways to what I would call good work in retirement.
certainly. And how did you get involved in this work? Like, I'm curious about what drew you into looking at this stage of life.
Yeah, so I mentioned earlier that when Mike was at Stanford at the Advanced Center for Advanced Study, he was working on a book on creative lives. And my dissertation came out of that study. I did a lot of those interviews. So I think I would date from that point. I was always interested in adult development, sort of the span of adult development. I continue to do research on everything from early adulthood on.
Hmm.
But that was a really fascinating opportunity to talk with people who were so deeply engaged in something so late into their lives. And
Yeah.
to try to understand better what it meant to them and what its sort of accumulated meaning was for them. And that I was kind of hooked at that point. I had already worked on a study where they were re-interviewing people at midlife who had been art students.
Oh,
So
cool.
that notion of how people's lives unfold around, sources of meaning and growth and excitement for them was already something I was really interested in.
That's so cool. I love it. So thinking about maybe some practical advice, because I think we would all like to imagine that if we just keep doing what we're doing, everything's going to end up great and we're going to enjoy our later years and we're doing just fine how it is. Or we even think like, oh, I'll get better about that when I have more time in the future. But what are some things, maybe some practical advice that younger people could do now to set themselves up for a positive aging experience? What are, putting aside like luck or genetics or health, like what do you wish that younger people could glean from what you and your colleagues have found about looking at older people who seem to be successful in their aging in the way that they approach it?
Yeah, so this I think would be a lesson both from our research on positive aging, but also more generally from the Good Work Project. And I
Hmm.
think from your own work since the Good Work Project using the Q sort or the value sort. And that's that people, once they get busy in life, have very little time for reflection. And
Yeah,
so I think if people could find a way to, at any point in their lifespan, because this is, I think, the thing that almost everybody in every domain that we studied on the Good Work Project appreciated about being interviewed. It was completely unexpected, but they appreciated the opportunity to step back and reflect on their work life.
Yeah.
And I think the value sort works that way for people in the work that you're doing. And I think
Yeah.
so that to me is something that is to find, we don't really have a practice for doing that. And
No,
we, right?
no. Yeah.
And we don't have structured opportunities for doing that. We don't necessarily have role models for doing that. So that I think is one. And the other one is like in the news all the time. Um, but we know that aging well, both cognitively and physically, is not helped by how sedentary our lifestyles are. So that's, I mean, that's a very practical one that I think everybody already knows, but the research really does support the importance of physical activity.
Yeah.
So
Get a
those would be
dog,
two.
go for a walk.
Go for a walk and maybe be thinking about the things that you want to accomplish in your life at the same time.
Go for a walk somewhere you can be contemplative.
Go for a walk in nature. That's what I would suggest.
That's my favorite thing to do. So good. I'm following Jeanne Nakamura's advice already. And then I guess just in keeping with tradition, when we get people that we can talk with on the podcast, we always like to ask, what is one piece of media? It could be a book, it could be a poem or a song, whatever you choose that you've turned to in the past or more recently for inspiration.
Well, I mean, right now I'm reading the Federalist Papers, but the last movie that I think I saw that would that I think would be interesting for people to see is a movie called Perfect Days, which
Okay.
is which is kind of about good work, and it's kind of about the other thing that I study, which is sort of the texture of daily life. I do a lot of research using a method that is just capturing little snapshots of people's daily lives, and it's a film about a Japanese, probably late midlife. Um, uh, he cleans public toilets,
Oh my God.
but and it's just kind of a very meditative, interesting. I mean, I found it very absorbing movie about a person's daily life, and I think it's a little bit of an insight into good work in an
That is
unexpected
so
context.
interesting that you mentioned this because I was at a meeting with Howard Gardner, who is one of the other founders of the Good Work Project, and he was talking about this movie. And that is so funny. I hadn't heard of the movie, and on Tuesday, Howard was telling me about it, and now today it's Thursday, and you're telling me about it as well. So I think I
That's
know what my next movie is going to be. Thank you.
that's so funny.
It is really funny. Sometimes it can be a small world, even when you're on the other side of the country. Things, you were meant to be on the same page, I think.
Thanks for mentioning that. That's great to know.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Nakamura, for this wonderful conversation. And thank you to everyone who tuned in for the podcast today. If you want to learn more about the Good Project, you can visit thegoodproject.org.
Thank you so much.